Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Directors meeting for November 5th, 2018. I apologize for being just a tad late. We've trying to make sure we have enough people here to suspend the rules to take care of certain items on our agenda, and are trying to get that negotiated as we speak. So, Madam Clerk, if you would please read the roll.
Director Hendricks, Director Richardson, Director Peck, Director Hines, Director Wright, Director Wyrick, Director Campuris, Director Fortson, Director Adcock, Vice Mayor Webb, Mayor Stodler.
Here. Let me call on Vice Mayor Kathy Webb for our invocation, please.
Will you please bow your head? In this time of disorder, we ask for guidance, wisdom, and strength. Regardless of our faith tradition, we ask that our words for peace and understanding be heard. From the Buddhist tradition, treat not others in ways that you yourself would find hurtful. From Judaism, what is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor. From Islam, not one of you truly believes until you wish for others what you wish for yourself. From Hinduism, this is the sum of duty. Do not do to others what would cause pain if done to you. From Christianity, in everything do to others as you would have them do to you, for this is the law and the prophets. And with unity, let us say, Amen.
Amen. If you would please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we get started, I am very pleased to let many of you in the audience know that we have a large contingency of mayors from Brazil that are with us for a couple of days. We are one of 4 cities in the United States that they are going to be visiting, Detroit, Chicago, and Washington, D.C., as well as Little Rock. And they've started here, and we're so happy to welcome them. And I believe we have an interpreter who will come forward, and if we could ask them to stand and briefly introduce themselves, and then I think you have one person that may be designated as a speaker. Good.
Well, good evening. I hope you have had a good day. I will speak in Portuguese. For to be more faster and more practical. Nós somos prefeitos de estado no sul do país chamado Rio Grande do Sul.
So we have here today 14 if you'll speak in the microphone, please, Mariana.
We have here today 14 mayors from a state in the south of Brazil called Rio Grande do Sul.
O nosso estado tem 497 municípios e é presidido por uma associação chamada FAMURGS, cujo presidente atual está aqui, que é o prefeito Setolin. Esta associação, a FAMURGS, ela é composta de 27 associações regionais.
And we have an association responsible for the 497 cities in the state that are composed by 27 regions. And the president of this association is here today, Mr. Santolini.
Uma dessas 27 associações regionais é a MESN, que nós estamos aqui que nós estamos aqui representando e é composta por 35 municípios.
So today we are here representing one of these regions, and we're made of 35 cities. Composed.
A população total da nossa região, a Mersey, ela tem mais de 1 milhão de habitantes e é composta por cidades que têm de 4 mil a 500 mil habitantes.
And we have cities that range from 4,000 to 500,000 inhabitants participating in this association.
São cidades que têm origem na cidadania italiana. Todos nós somos Italian descent. No Brasil se diz que nós somos uma pequena Itália, a Little Italy in Brazil.
And they call themselves a Little Italy because all of them are descendants from Italian.
A nossa produção ela é bastante diversificada. Nós temos grandes empresas no setor metal mecânico, no setor de borrachas, no setor de biocombustíveis, biofuels, em processamento de alimentos.
And we have a variety range of different products that we are very proud to produce. We have the biofuel, we have furniture, wood, and a range of food and nutrients, wines, and other metals. A variety of very big diversity in metals and rubber and other kinds of materials.
Somos os maiores produtores de uvas e maçãs do Brasil e, obviamente, os maiores produtores de vinhos e de espumantes, sparkling wines, de todo o Brasil.
So we are the biggest producers of grapes, and so wine and also apples. So wines and sparkling wine. If you want to have some good wine in Brazil, go visit Rio Grande do Sul.
Acho que eu preciso apresentar todos? Não. Acho que não. Não. Está presente, Gostaria que os prefeitos aqui presentes levantassem. Mayor Lídio Escorteganha, Mayor Antônio Setolin, Mayor Jairo Joque Rosso, Mayor Ademir José Dalé, Mayor Volney Minosso, José Maximiano Espanhol, Jorge Pivoto, Geri Ângelo Macanhã, Valdemar Decali, Vilmor Carbonera, Adair Zeca, Valdir Carlos Fabre e Rui Carlos Gouveia.
Well, very good.
Very good.
Thank you so much for your kind words. And I had an opportunity to meet with them earlier today and to visit with them about the city of Little Rock and our form of government and how we operate. And they had a chance to learn about our budget and all sorts of different things. They've been to the Clinton Center. They've been to Central High. I think they've been to the Capitol. Is that right? And are now here for to understand how we as a body legislate for the city. And Mariana, our translator, I think you all should know, was a foreign exchange student with the American Field Service many years ago here in the Little Rock area. And she loves it so much that she found someone to marry here and has moved back to this area. And so we are so very happy to have her, not only as one of our citizens and residents, but also she did an excellent job in terms of her translation of Portuguese for us. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mariana. All right, and hopefully you can stay with us for a little bit, and I know that you're going to need to leave, so Don't worry, we'll be able to try and get by without you. Okay, let me add, okay, very good. Let me go ahead. We have one modification for the agenda. M1, is there a motion to add this to the agenda? Is there a second? All in favor indicate by saying aye. Opposed, saying nay. The resolution will be added, and we'll add it to the consent agenda if there's no objection. And we have one proposal to defer item 13, dealing with First Tee. Is there a motion on that? Is there a second? All right. Please note that Director Hines is recusing from voting on this item. All in favor of the deferral indicate by saying aye. Opposed, say nay. The chair will vote aye on the deferral, so it passes. Okay, we can move on to the consent agenda, items 1 through 6. Madam Clerk, if you would please read the consent agenda.
The consent agenda consists of a resolution to amend Little Rock, Arkansas Resolution Number 14,869 of October 1st, 2018, to establish that the correct perimeters for the street and drainage improvements on Mableville West Road to be completed by James A. Rogers Excavating Incorporated is from Otter Creek East Road to South Loop Road and for other purposes, funding from the 2012 386 Capital Improvement Sales Tax. A resolution authorizes the city manager to enter into a contract with Summit Truck Group for a total purchase price of $120,080 for the purchase of one 12-yard dump truck for the Public Works Department and for other purposes. A resolution authorizes the city manager to enter into a contract with River City Hydraulics for a total purchase price of $168,491 for the purchase of one Freightliner roll-off truck for the Public Works Department and for other purposes. A resolution to approve for the approval of a resolution authorizing one operator permit and 100 taxicab permits for Greater Little Rock Transportation Service, LLC, and the approval of one operator permit and 5 taxicab permits for Ken's Cab, LLC, for the period of January 1st, 2019 to December 31st, 2019, and for the purposes. A resolution to adopt a new investment policy for the City of Little Rock, Arkansas, repealing Resolution Number 12,520 of May 15th, 2007, and for the purposes. A resolution authorized the mayor to enter into agreement with Thrash Law Firm, PA, and others to represent the interests of the City of Little Rock, Arkansas in litigation regarding gross receipt taxes for the internet rental of hotel rooms and for other purposes. That concludes the consent agenda.
There's a motion and a second to adopt the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, saying nay. The consent agenda is adopted.
Mayor, I forgot to do M1.
All right, go forward with M1, please.
A resolution to make appointments to the Little Rock Housing Authority Board of Commissioners and for other purposes.
Move for the adoption of that resolution.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to adopt the consent agenda. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
M1, I apologize. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, saying nay. M1 is also adopted. Our city attorney tells me that I cannot be the sixth vote on the motion for deferral of Resolution 13. Director Richardson, would you like to reconsider your vote?
Yes, I vote aye.
You'll vote aye? Okay. Please let the record reflect that Mr. Richardson has changed his vote on item 13 to an aye vote, which is the sixth vote to defer. Yes.
I'm sorry, Director Wyrick had asked that I tell the board that her mother is in the hospital. She's been there the last couple of days, and she's with her mother, and she will not be here tonight for that reason.
Thank you, Director Adcock. And Director Fortson had some surgery today. I think we're trying to get him here to be able to vote on the issue, and I believe that Director Hendricks is out of town. So for those of you who are wondering. So, okay, we can now move on to citizen communication. I've got 2 cards. Russ Raycop, you're recognized, please.
Good evening, Mayor and Board. I'm disappointed that the honorable mayors from South America had left. I was going to invite them to go with me later to Midtown Billiards and experience some epic nightlife here in Little Rock. But all joking aside, this week most of us citizens here in Little Rock received some of the best news that we could receive, and that was our befouled police chief took a job in Syracuse. Our condolences to them, but that brings us to my topic tonight. That we are hunt and selection of a police chief. And I've had some email correspondence with city manager, and I would urge this board and some of y'all's last actions to adopt a resolution that there be a citizens commission or committee formed for the sole purpose of assisting the city manager to select, interview candidates for the police chief. And I'm not talking about after he selected the cream of the crop, but from the get-go, where they're able to review applications, do some fact-checking and things like that. You know, the city is experiencing some problems, and the police department is racially divided, and the new chief needs to be one who can bring folks together and clean up that department and not continue the legacy of Chief Buckner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Raycop. Let's see. The next card we have is from Ryan Davis.
Good evening, Brother Mayor, sisters and brother directors, administrators of the city. And I was preceded by Mr. Raycop. Now I feel like I don't have to rush through my 3 minutes. This is certainly germane to what he had to say. And I have to say, first off, I find it immensely disappointing that a lot of the response we've gotten from some of our city leaders around the fact that our police department is rife with violence against citizens has been well, that's not really part of what we do. And I understand it on a certain level, but on another level, what the folks in the city of Little Rock want to hear is not just that we're going to stop running afoul of the exclusionary rule, but that we're not going to be targeting and continuing to target certain homes in certain communities. When we came here, and I say we, a group of compatriots and myself, we came here and we talked about the possibility of the city considering a rule whereby marijuana would be the lowest level consideration, that we could have our police not look the other way, but also not go tapping people's pockets. You dig? And what happened was our directors, who I think are all wonderful people, said nothing, and then did nothing also. That was immensely disappointing to me. It's looking at our City of Little Rock's policy statement, and what stands out immediately, perhaps because it's the first line, says protect the rights of the people, ensure public order, and provide public safety. And it seems like that this public order is of the utmost importance when the black boot tactics of the Little Rock Police Department are put out there in the Washington Post and ProPublica, who actually ran an article about our love of flashbang grenades more than a year ago, and we hear not a single solitary mumbling word from the leaders of our city. I'm immensely disappointed. I say this to you lovingly because that's my tradition. John Wesley and talked about holy boldness and our social responsibility, and I would be remiss if I didn't say that to you in as strident terms as possible. Vice Mayor Webb, in her beautiful invocation, which I thought was beautifully inclusive of so many faith traditions, said first, in this time of disorder, and certainly we're in a time of disorder, I don't know that we should have to always wait until some Tuesday election day for order to come back. I don't know that we have to rely on the expedience of individuals. And my prayer for the city and my prayer for the leaders of the city is that you at least respond, that you at least say something, that you use your social media for something other than niceties and BS. That somebody said something about our overuse of flashbang grenades. I got 5 seconds left, and so I think I'll leave it there. I'm going to go home to my babies. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Director Richardson, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Davis. Hopefully I'm lucky tomorrow to get reelected, and it's my intent as a sponsor of that ordinance that he referenced to bring that back up because since we've defeated the ordinance that I drafted, and several other municipalities who've adopted that approach. Our neighbors across the water, Jacksonville, Oklahoma City, New York City, they've all adopted that approach to engage, to make marijuana, low-level marijuana uses, not to legalize and not to encourage, but to use our police resources in a better manner to make sure we're getting the most out of the limited amount of funding we have in terms of bringing officers on board. And I hope, hopefully I'm lucky tomorrow, Vice Mayor, that I'm back up here with you guys. And should I get reelected, I have every intention on bringing that back up, Ryan. But one other thing before you leave, sir. Tom, with respect to flashbangs, isn't there some legal action that prohibits us from making any kind of comments or any kind of reference to that policy, that approach? And there's some legal action we're faced with the most recent use of that prohibits us from making any kind of public statements?
Director Richardson, there is an action that challenges the use of explosive devices and breaches with no-knock warrants. And there have been public hearings trying to find other plaintiffs to bring to the city.
But from the pulpit up here as board members, are we prohibited from making any comments, either supportive or?
I would suggest that, but I would also let you know that before the first Washington Post article came out, an internal review of these started and is underway.
Okay, so the legal action was initiated before that article came out last week? Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Tom. That's all I have.
Director Campiris, you're recognized, please.
I would like to take a 15-minute adjournment.
I've got a couple of other things to do first, okay? If you'll hold that, Director Campiris.
I'd love to.
All right. I know we have some other ordinances here, but I would like to move on to item 13. Well, Mr. Carpenter, I've got a card here about a lawsuit that we're involved in as it relates to those issues that was just dropped off of my hands here. It's something that's already been brought before us. It's in litigation. Are we permitted to be able to visit about this or not?
You're permitted, but Mayor, I would recommend that you do not. As your lawyer, I mean, nothing you say is going to be helpful to the litigation and the allegations that they're making, and there's a procedure in place for being able to go through any questions that may be raised that will be considered by the court.
All right. As our citizen communication indicates, the time is reserved for things that have not already been brought to our attention. The Talley case has been brought to our attention previously by Mr. Rakop, if not others. It's been in the newspaper. We're well aware of it. Mr. Carpenter indicated that the issue is under internal review, so I'm going to make the decision that this is not a valid element for citizen communication. So thank you very much. I appreciate you attending and hope you'll stay for the rest of the meeting. We can now move on to item 13. 14. I've got item 13 as well.
Well, it's going to be deferred.
Excuse me. I'm sorry. Let me see. I got a card.
It was deferred, Director Richardson.
Yeah, we've I apologize. We got too many cards up here. All right. Yes. We can now move on to item 14. Let me ask for a reading of the resolution, please.
A resolution to rescind the Little Rock Planning Commission's action in denying a variance request for the Breeding Addition preliminary plat located at 7718 Henderson Road, Pulaski County, Arkansas, and for the purposes.
Okay. We've got several cards on this. And let me just make sure the board understands how the vote would occur on this item. A vote to rescind the Planning Commission action would be to allow the variance. Okay? Which is where the staff recommendation is. They recommend approval of a vote to rescind the ordinance. Or excuse me, a vote to rescind the Planning Commission action, which would be to vote for the resolution. I have several cards that want to speak, I believe they want to speak against it, but I'm not sure if they understand Is that the case? You don't want, you're in favor of the planning commission's action. Is that right? That's correct. All right. All right.
We're thoroughly confused now.
I know. I can tell. Well, we talked about this earlier today. Well, let's first go ahead and read the resolution, please. All right. Thank you. I'm trying to make sure I understand what we're doing here. Okay. I've got several cards that wish to speak
Did you open the public hearing?
against the resolution. I'm going to open up the public hearing, and we'll hear from these folks. Director Adcock, do you have a preliminary question? All right. The applicant is here. All right. If you'll come forward first, please.
Represented by counsel, Your Honor. Good evening. Mayor Stodola, directors, thank you for letting me address the board. My name is Harrison Kemp, and I represent Debbie and Gary Breeding. The Breedings sought Planning Commission approval of their preliminary plat to subdivide their 5-acre lot on Henderson Road into 2 roughly equal lots. The Breedings lot is a long rectangle, approximately 330 feet by 660 feet. They're trying to create 2 lots by splitting their 5 acres long ways. One that's going to be 150 by 660 and one that's going to be about 179 by 660. One lot has an existing septic tank on it and a home. The other lot has been approved by the Department of Health for an additional septic system. Because the 2 proposed lots were more than 3 times deeper than they were wide, the Breeding sought a variance of Section 31-232, which restricted lot dimensions of that size. Despite staff recommendation for approval of the variance request, the Planning Commission voted 5-5 to deny the request. The Commission took public comment from several objectors who voiced a variety of concerns about the proposed variance. However, almost none of the objections raised were related to the substance of the proposed variance. Instead, the focus of the objections appeared to center on whether a mobile home could be placed on the additional lot, and whether there had been a previous mobile home on the property, and whether the Breedings or some predecessor had used the property as a gun range. Several objectors made the argument that the requested variance would increase traffic. This was a misplaced argument. The variance request was to waive the width-to-depth ratio requirement of our subdivision ordinance. It is not disputed by any objector that the Breedings are free to propose a subdivision whose lots do not need the requested variance. They could, for instance, seek to subdivide their tract into 4 equal-sized lots, assuming Department of Health approval. This subdivision would not require a variance and presumably would be approved without much fanfare by the Planning Commission, provided that all of the other subdivision requirements were met. The argument that the requested variance would increase traffic is not persuasive because arguably the Breedings' request to create only 2 lots will limit the development's potential impact on traffic. What's more, there was suggestion that there are only 5-acre tracts on Henderson Road. However, immediately to the south of the Breedings' tract, fronting on Henderson Road, are 4 single-family homes situated on less than half-acre tracts. The Board of Directors is empowered to review the Breedings' application for plat approval and variance. The Breedings are asking the board to consider the relevant facts and the law and grant their requested variance, reversing the Planning Commission. A variance can be granted when extraordinary hardships on practical difficulties may result from strict compliance with these regulations, or the purpose of these regulations may be served to a greater extent by an alternative proposal. 4 criteria should be used to determine whether a variance should be granted. 1, the conditions upon which the request is based are unique to the property, and it is determined because of the particular physical surrounding, shape, or topographic conditions of the property involved that strict application of the regulations would deprive the owner of reasonable use of the property. 2, the granting of a variance will not be detrimental to the public safety, health, or welfare, or injurious to other property. 3, the variance will not in any manner vary the provisions of the zoning ordinance, the master street plan, or the municipal plan. And 4, the variance is not based solely on pecuniary difficulties, but has other overriding hardships. Each of these 4 criteria favor the Breedings in this case. Their tract of ground is uniquely shaped with the short side fronting on Henderson Road. The proposed lots are both in excess of 150 feet wide and both in excess of 100,000 square feet. They are quite large by our subdivision standards, and the fact that they are also quite deep should not prohibit this reasonable use, and the strict application of the width-to-depth ratio deprives the Breedings of their reasonable use of the property. The Breedings submit that their request does not work any detriment to the public health, safety, or welfare, and no evidence or argument has been offered by staff or by any objector to suggest that it does. It is undisputed that the requested variance has no impact on the city's zoning ordinance, master street plan, or municipal plan. Finally, the requested variance is not based at all on pecuniary difficulties. The requested variance is an alternative proposal which serves the subdivision ordinance's purposes to a greater extent than the strict application of the width-to-depth ratio requirement. The Breedings' proposal represents a reasonable, responsible, and beneficial use of their land. The Breedings respectfully request that the board reverse the Planning Commission's decision and grant their requested variance. They and I are available for questions that you might have, and we thank you for your consideration.
All right, Director Hancock, do you have any other questions for the applicant? Pardon? All right, I have several cards that wish to speak against the passage of the resolution. Karen Goss is first.
I am a daughter of, my parents live on Henderson Road. Excuse me. They've lived there for a little over 20 years. It is a quiet neighborhood. If y'all allow this to happen, not only will they split it, then everybody else on the street has an opportunity to split. Then we become a traffic neighborhood. In and out, you don't know what's going to happen. Most of the people on the road are elderly. They've lived there a long time. So therefore, when you start splitting up, everybody splits. I don't like the fact that when you turn, let me rephrase. When you have a rule and you allow this person to break it, you change the rules for this one, you have to change it for everybody. Before long, we do have a busy street. My grandkids go over and play. Yes, we have a big area to play in, 5 acres. Everybody wants to be able to be safe, have their own area to play in. You start dividing, more people coming in. I don't approve of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Goss. Jeanette Goss is next, please.
Excuse me, I have spoken before and tonight.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Goss. Steve Harrison?
Excuse me. This is probably the second or third time that we've been before a board to try to take care of this. There's been a lot of things done out here. There's been a lot, and I hate to bring this up again because it's kind of a moot point right now, but there's been a lot of gunshots out here. It was on their property. It was their family doing all of it. Their lot is really close to this road. I have an 8-year-old daughter that I walk up and down this road every day, and they're not the only ones, but it's not safe to have that happen. The shooting has stopped for now, but my concern is it just stopped for now? The ruling out here, from my understanding, is these are single dwelling properties. We all knew that when we bought our properties out there. Now we're trying to break it up, and I don't agree with that. I've always gone by the rules and by the law. These are the rules. They should have known that when they bought the property. And that's about all I can say right now.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Harrison Kemp.
That was me, Your Honor.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mayor.
You spoke forward. I got you. I'm sorry. Your card was stuck here in the middle. Donna McHenry.
Before I speak, I do want to make sure no one knows this is not a personal issue. I'm not trying to be insulting or hurt anyone's feelings, but it is our neighborhood, and there is no one here that probably doesn't love their neighborhoods. Our problem is, and this is very difficult, but he is correct, in the variance,
You cannot grant a variance if it's against the public safety, welfare, health, etc. Our problem is, and I guess before I start with our problem, I better tell you a little, our neighborhood, it is rural. We are only in the extraterrestrial, sounds space-like, but anyway, you know, the jurisdiction, we are in the country. But it's not a country setting. Our street's only a quarter of a mile long at the most. It just dead ends. It doesn't have the cul-de-sac. It goes into people's property. But in that area, there's 20-plus houses. And what has occurred is a year ago, this property was bought, and I would remind you that the variance does allow that to grant the variance, there has to be a denial of reasonable use of the property. The property has always been zoned an R2 single-family home within this neighborhood. And I disagree with part of what Ms. Goss said, you know, when she said we're all elderly. You know, I kind of resented that a little, I have to admit. But it is an older neighborhood, and we've all been there 10, 20, 30 years. We are not a neighborhood where they could have come in and thought this was a neighborhood open for development. This has been there for a long time. What goes on the 4+ acres, we agree, that has nothing to do with y'all. The problem is, and I do have to talk about the gun use that was on the neighborhood, in the property. From the very beginning, there was set up a target range. And the family, their children, use this often, and I agree, it hadn't been as often since we've been arguing about this. But there was a lot of gunfire that went on this property at target practice. But it went on long enough that we all had time to call each other. We got together. We tried going down there a couple of times to talk to the neighbors. We were told, not by the breedings, but by their grown children, that fire their guns whenever they wanted, and they'd call the sheriff if we came back. So this is very much a safety issue for our neighborhood, because if you grant this variance, the problem becomes we have they're not going to shoot towards each other houses. We become more at risk if you half this property, and we do not want that. Now, it was very appropriate that after our last hearing, and this is our third hearing, the first resolution that they tried to pass was not for 2, it was for 3. And so we do worry that there's not just the one child, there's a family, and we don't want this to become a family shooting range. But after our last hearing, this was the headline on the Arkansas Democrat, and it was violent reality. Arkansas ranks 7th in gun deaths, but weapon restrictions not on table. We don't want a shooting range in our neighborhood. We don't let our grandchildren go on our back lot because all of our back property abuts the back of their property. I don't want someone to get shot. So the gun issue is a huge issue. There's also a health issue because of we are all on septic tanks, but there is city water to part of our neighborhood because multiple years ago there became a problem of leakage into the wells. And so a lot of the neighbors got together and had city water brought in. A lot of us are still on wells. We don't want to upset this equilibrium, and we don't want our water supply. And unfortunately, we don't seem to be able to work out any issues as a neighborhood. So it is, our water supply is a concern. And the injurious to other property, we have been told, and it's been a while back, that it would be mobile home. We don't want any mobile. We do not have anything but permanent structures on our neighborhood street. And you don't have to go very far in the country to find out I think mobile homes have a great place to provide homes for people. But I do think that, I'm not trying to say anything at all hurtful, but we don't want it in our neighborhood. We want a permanent structure on the properties. But most of all, we don't want to feel unsafe in our neighborhood. We feel that granting this variance will make us unsafe. We would also like to point out that there is no advantage to the city. A lot of times a developer comes in and they're going to upgrade a neighborhood, they're going to take an abandoned area, and that's not true in our case. All of the neighbors object to this variance. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McHenry. The next card I have is from Robert McHenry.
Mayor and the board, I appreciate the opportunity, but I think Donna said it well, and I will not take any more of your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McHenry. Ray Hanley.
Thank you, Mayor. First, with all respect to the staff that want to override the planning board, they don't live on Henderson Road, so let's get that said. I've lived there for 31 years. During that time, my neighbors have invested probably $2 million in their property on this road. They did this relying on the zoning. And the attorney said that it wouldn't be injurious to the other property owners if the variance was overridden, subdivided, and a mobile home was put there. That's just not true. It would harm the investment that myself and my neighbors have made. We've all relied on the zoning. The zoning commission voted to deny this, and I would respectfully ask that you would uphold that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Henley. Heidi Thoreau?
Good evening. I won't take much of your time. I believe Ms. McHenry said most of everything that I had planned to say, so I'm just going to say just a few things. I live right next door to the breeding house, and as Mr. Hanley said, the breedings don't even live on the property. One of their grown children does. So they're definitely going to want to put a home on the other part of the property, which that's just going to diminish the value of my home, being that there's more homes on less square footage, less acreage. I'm one of the people that doesn't live on a 5-acre plat, but those homes have been there for, I mean, the man who built the homes, the road is named after him, Mr. Henderson. He owned a dairy farm up there, and he had those homes built. And they're all one resident homes that we don't, and plots. We don't want things being subdivided. If that's what they wanted, then I would think that the breedings would have gone out and found a piece of property that would have allowed them to do that. But instead, they purchased this property, and then what I believe the intention of wanting to split it from the beginning. It was a low-priced property due to foreclosure. Great steal, can't blame them for buying it, but if that was their intention all along, they should have found a property that they would have been able to do that without the disrupting the neighborhood and frustrating their neighbors and upsetting us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Thoreau. Michael Craig.
Thank you all for hearing us. Everything that's been said is pretty straightforward. Again, our iteration, specifically a great deal of it was the initiation by more than one lot, excessive gunfire, directional fire. I'm a hunter. I love to hunt. They only have one major issue, and that's, at this point, diminished property. I've been out there 30 years. I own 2 properties, 17 acres. If they're shooting, they can only shoot one direction, that they're not shooting at somebody other than me that's right behind them up on the hill. I have real issues with it. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Craig. Okay, that concludes the people speaking against Mr. Kemp as the applicant or the breedings. I'll give you a chance to respond in any way, if you have any response.
I do generally. I would fail to respond directly to each of the observations that were made, except to highlight that, again, they tend to focus on things that are completely atopical to what we're talking about here. We're talking about a variance of the width to depth ratio. That's all that's on the table today, whether or not that was appropriately given or not. And certainly without acknowledging that it's true or admitting that it's true that gunfire has taken place or that excessive or directional gunfire has taken place, it's immaterial to anything before this board. There isn't a request to put a firing range on this property. There's just a request to allow a division of this property which would otherwise absolutely be allowable, except it's in a dimension that instead of it being a square, it's going to be a longer rectangle. None of the objections that have been raised have made any attempt to qualify or to speak directly to the injury that is going to cause. They instead speculate about whether or not a mobile home, which would of course require a rezoning or a conditional use permit application to be successful. They speculate about whether an additional home is going to be built there, and then again whether or not it's going to be a safety issue because they're discharging firearms. And so what I would say is that none of the objectors have made a case that the variance which is requested here shouldn't be granted. They clearly do have personal issues which might have a remedy somewhere else, but they do not have a remedy here. And I would also observe that most of the objectors made reference to the zoning, that when they purchased their property, they did so understanding that this was R2 single family. And nobody's proposing that that be changed. This isn't a rezoning application. We're not trying to change the zoning. We're trying to do a subdivision, with, again, for R2 single family. So the idea that that they were entitled to rely, that the objectors or the adjoining landowners were entitled to rely on the zoning as it existed when they purchased it, first of all, that's not even true, and that's not what we're asking for. So I just wanted to be clear about that. And then also, obviously, I'm available for any questions that might be directed.
Thank you, Mr. Kemp. Director Adcock, you're next, please.
No, I've got my answers. Thank you.
All right, Director Hines.
Tom, so it's always fun when we get into the ETJ. Is it legal in this area to discharge a firearm?
Yes.
So any of these residences could discharge in a safe manner on their properties?
As far as I know, the county controls that, not the city.
Okay, so that's something we don't have any control of. Would a mobile home be allowed on this lot?
No, not without a rezoning request.
Okay. And then so what say you to the fact of what we can consider on this application based on the applicant's assertions?
Well, you're not depriving them of the use of their property because the property can still be used for a home. It would be on a large lot as other homes are in the area. The safety question has been raised because of the history of the use of the property. I'm not clear as how long that history is. It sounds like it has been a relatively short period of time since the applicant owned the property, not in a long period of time before that. And frankly, you live in West Little Rock, where you live probably used to be a place they shot deer all the time because we could still see the...
And I live close enough to the county line that there's still gunfire with people sighting in their rifles and stuff like that. So it's something I'm used to.
I think it's it's going to be strictly a question as to the board's judgment. The argument's being made that if you subdivide one lot, you have to subdivide all lots. That's not accurate. I mean, if you subdivide this lot, it doesn't mean that other lots have to be subdivided. That will always be a question for the board of directors. On the other hand, if you are opposed to this, you're not denying them any value of their property because they've got exactly the value they paid for.
Okay, thank you.
Director Wright, you're recognized, please.
Yes, Mayor, I heard the objectors say that they bought their property with the understanding that what the zoning was. And I'm also understanding that the zoning really hasn't changed and is not changing. So is there some type of bill of assurance that stipulated to them that this property would always be at least 5 acres? Is there any type of bill of assurance?
Director Wright, the answer is that there is no restrictive covenant or bill of assurance of record anywhere that I was able to find in my title search today. So that's not to say that some individual lot buyer or acreage buyer didn't have some restriction in their individual deed, but not on the deed that the breeding's acquired, and there's no plat or other bill of assurance that's going to restrict the use or maintain a minimum lot size or a setback other than the city's requirements to that effect. No architectural planning committee or anything like that.
Okay. And Mr. Moore, your staff did recommend approval?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Too late. Director Richardson, you're recognized, please.
Yes, Mayor. Director Wright's last point is a perfect segue to my question to you. Can you give us the same kind of clarity with respect to our yays and our nays to make sure we have the clarity of what a yay vote is versus a nay vote? Because I think you gave us some instructions. And sometimes we have issues like this that we have to have that kind of specificity.
A vote for the resolution,
Yes.
which would be a vote aye, would be to grant the variance.
Yes.
A vote nay would be to deny the variance.
And staff is recommending approval. Is that correct, Bruce?
All right. We can go ahead and move on to a vote. All in. What? Okay, well, we'll close the public hearing. Sorry. It's been a long one. All right. All in favor of granting the resolution indicate by saying aye. All opposed say nay. The resolution has failed. Mr. Kemp, Breedings, thank you very much. Thank you all for your attention.
Mayor, as
The
they
resolution
leave-
has failed.
As they leave, you ought to know that the attorney for the applicant is the grandson of Joseph Kemp, who was the city attorney for this city for over 20 years. And I can vouch that Donna Henry is not elderly because we graduated from high school at the same time. We are merely more mature, is what I'm told.
All right, very well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We can now move back to our ordinances, items 7 through 12. Let me ask for the first reading of those ordinances, please.
An ordinance to reclassify property located in the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, amending the official zoning map of the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, and for the purposes, an ordinance to establish the rate of taxation of property for the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, to be collected in the year 2019 for various funds of the city of Little Rock, to declare an emergency, and for the purposes, an ordinance to amend Little Rock, Arkansas ordinance number 21,564 of March 20th, 2018, to establish the maturity schedule for the city's hotel gross receipt tax bond, series 2018, to ratify and confirm the sale of the bonds, to declare an emergency, and for the purposes, an ordinance to declare it impractical and unfeasible to bid, to authorize the city manager to dispense with the requirement of competitive bids for the purchase of 40 less than lethal electronic control devices from Axon Enterprise Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $102,211.48 for the Little Rock Police Department, to declare an emergency, and for the purposes, an ordinance to declare it impractical and unfeasible to bid, to authorize the city manager to enter into a sole source agreement with Columbus in an amount not to exceed $14,426 for the Little Rock Zoo's point-of-sale software improvements and upgrades, and for the purposes, an ordinance to declare it impractical and unfeasible to bid, to authorize participation of the city of Little Rock, Arkansas in an insurance pool administered by the Arkansas Municipal League for certain litigation costs, expenses, and coverage in an amount not to exceed $572,871.04, to declare an emergency, and for the purposes, first reading.
There's a motion and a second to suspend the rules and place these ordinances on second reading. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Second reading, please.
An ordinance to reclassify property located in the city of Little Rock, Arkansas. An ordinance to establish the rate of taxation of property for the city of Little Rock, Arkansas to be collected in the year 2019 for various funds of the city of Little Rock to declare an emergency. An ordinance to amend Little Rock, Arkansas ordinance number 21,564 to establish the maturity schedule for the city's hotel gross receipt tax bonds, series 2018, to ratify and confirm the sale of the bonds, to declare an emergency. An ordinance to declare it impractical and unfeasible to bid, to authorize the city manager to dispense with the requirement of competitive bids for the purchase of 40 less than lethal electronic control devices from Axon Enterprise Incorporated in amount not to exceed $102,211.48 for the Little Rock Police Department, to declare an emergency. An ordinance to declare it impractical and unfeasible to bid, to authorize the city manager to enter into a sole source agreement with Columbus in an amount not to exceed $14,426 for the Little Rock Zoo's point-of-sale software improvements and upgrades. An ordinance to declare it impractical and unfeasible to bid, to authorize the participation of the city of Little Rock, Arkansas in an insurance pool administered by the Arkansas Municipal League for certain litigation costs, expenses, and coverage, in an amount not to exceed $572,871.04 to declare an emergency. Second reading.
Move to suspend the rules and place on third and final reading.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to suspend the rules and place these ordinances on third and final reading. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Third and final reading, please.
An ordinance to reclassify property located in the city of Little Rock, Arkansas. An ordinance to establish the rate of taxation of property for the city of Little Rock, Arkansas to be collected in the year 2019 for various funds of the city of Little Rock, to declare an emergency. An ordinance to amend Little Rock, Arkansas ordinance number 21,564 to establish the maturity schedule for the city's hotel gross receipt tax bonds, series 2018, to ratify and confirm the sale of the bonds, to declare an emergency. An ordinance to declare it impractical and unfeasible to bid, to authorize the city manager to dispense with the requirement of competitive bids for the purchase of 40 less than lethal electronic control devices from Axon Enterprises Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $102,211.48 for the Little Rock Police Department, to declare an emergency. An ordinance to declare it impractical and unfeasible to bid, to authorize the city manager to enter into a sole source agreement with Columbus in an amount not to exceed $14,426 for the Little Rock Zoo's point-of-sale software improvements and upgrades. An ordinance to declare it impractical and unfeasible to bid, to authorize the participation of the city of Little Rock, Arkansas in an insurance pool administered by the Arkansas Municipal League for certain litigation costs, expenses, and coverage in an amount not to exceed $572,871.04 to declare an emergency. Third and final reading.
All right, we've had the three readings. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the passage of these ordinances indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. The ordinances are approved, and we have several emergency clauses. All in favor of the emergency clause on ordinance number 8 indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. That emergency clause is also approved. On the emergency clause on ordinance number 9, all in favor of that emergency clause indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. That emergency clause is also deemed approved. Ordinance number 10. On the emergency clause, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. That emergency clause is also approved. And on ordinance number 12, all in favor of that emergency clause indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. That emergency clause is also approved. And that concludes our agenda for, Vice Mayor Webb has something she'd like to say.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Arts and Culture Commission.
Pull your mic over.
Thank you. The Arts and Culture Commission asked that we make this announcement tonight. The World War I Centennial Commission is asking towns and cities across the country to toll their bells at 11 o'clock on the 11th in remembrance of all of those who served and sacrificed in World War I. And they're trying to let churches and other entities know about that so we can do that commemoration next week on Veterans Day.
That will be on Monday, the 11th, right? Yes, very good. Thank you very much. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. We're in adjournment. Thank you.